There it goes. In here. See if this sounds okay. There it goes. It's kind of bad. I don't know. Hello. We are just not going to talk about Game of Thrones. No, we're just not. I am so disappointed. I'm not happy. I don't just, no. Hi, Cassie. Hi, Asder. Hi, John. Hi, Sam. What's up, Bruno? How you guys doing? How we doing? Um, you guys can tell me if you don't want this mic. I don't know if it's loud enough or if you don't like the sound of it. I can just go get the right cord for this and we can use the Yeti. I am not prepared for this. Mic is fine. Are you sure? Genuinely, you can ask for the Yeti. Oh, Cassie, I'm gonna get the Yeti. We'll do that. What's that? Changing to hello? Yeti? Hello? It's not picking it up. Why is that? Huh. There it goes. What is it doing? Hello? Hello? Okay, so it's here. We here? What's up, Maelstrom? How you doing? Loud? Is that loud? Is that better? Hello? Better? Okay. So this is it, guys. This is the last 2 chapters. Let's frickin' see what happens, shall we? Chapter 20. The Dementor's Kiss. Harry had never been a part of a stranger group. Crookshanks led the way down the stairs. Lupin, Pettigrew, and Ron went next. Looking like entrants in a 6-legged race. Next came Professor Snape, drifting creepily along, his toes hitting each stair as they descended, held up by his own wand, which was being pointed at him by Sirius. Harry and Hermione brought up the rear. Getting back into the tunnel was difficult. Lupin, Pettigrew, and Ron had to turn sideways to manage it. Lupin still had Pettigrew covered with his wand. Harry could see them edging awkwardly along the tunnel in single file. Crookshanks was still in the lead. Harry went right after Sirius, who was still making Snape drift along ahead of them. He kept bumping his lolling head on the low ceiling. Harry had the impression Sirius was making no effort to prevent this. "You know what this means," Sirius said abruptly to Harry as they made their slow progress along the tunnel, turning Pettigrew in. "You're free," said Harry. "Yes," said Sirius, "but I'm also... I don't know if anyone ever told you. I'm your godfather." "Yeah, I knew that," said Harry. "Well, your parents appointed me your guardian," said Sirius stiffly. "If anything happened to them..." Harry waited. Did Sirius mean what he thought he meant? "I'll understand, of course, if you want to stay with your aunt and uncle," said Sirius, "but, well, think about it. Once my name's cleared, if you wanted a different home..." Some sort of explosion took place in the pit of Harry's stomach. "Live with you," he said, accidentally cracking his head on a bit of rock protruding from the ceiling. "Leave the Dursleys." "Of course I thought you wouldn't want to," said Sirius quickly. "I understand. I just thought I'd..." "Are you insane?" said Harry, his voice easily as croaky as Sirius's. "Of course I want to leave the Dursleys. Have you got a house? When can I move in?" Sirius turned right around to look at him. Snape's head was scraping the ceiling, but Sirius didn't seem to care. "You want to? You mean it?" "Yeah, I mean it," said Harry. Sirius's gaunt face broke into the first true smile Harry had seen upon it. The difference it made was startling, as though a person 10 years younger were shining through the starved mask. For a moment, he was recognizable as the man who laughed at Harry's parents' wedding. They did not speak again until they had reached the end of the tunnel. Crookshanks darted up first. He had evidently pressed his paw to the knot on the trunk because Lupin, Pettigrew, and Ron clambered upward without any sound of savaging branches. Sirius saw Snape up through the hole, then stood back for Harry and Hermione to pass. At last, all of them were out. The grounds were very dark now. The only light came from the distant windows of the castle. Without a word, they set off. Pettigrew was still wheezing and occasionally whimpering. Harry's mind was buzzing. He was going to leave the Dursleys. He was going to live with Sirius Black, his parents' best friend. He felt dazed. What would happen when he told the Dursleys he was going to live with the convict they'd seen on television? "One wrong move, Peter," said Lupin threateningly ahead. His wand was still pointed sideways at Pettigrew's chest. Silently, they tramped through the wood, through the grounds. I'm sorry, I'm just so excited right now. Good night, Burrito. I love you, dude. Love you, dude. Silently, they tramped through the grounds, the castle lights growing slowly larger. Snape was still drifting weirdly ahead of Sirius, his chin bumping on his chest. And then, a cloud shifted. There were suddenly dim shadows on the ground. Their party was bathed in moonlight. No. 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 Snape collided with Lupin, Pettigrew, and Ron, who had stopped abruptly. Sirius froze. He flung out one arm to make Harry and Hermione stop. Harry could see Lupin's silhouette. He had gone rigid. Then his limbs began to shake. "Oh my," Hermione gasped. "He didn't take his potion tonight. He's not safe." "Run," Sirius whispered. "Run, now." But Harry couldn't run. Ron was chained to Pettigrew and Lupin. He leapt forward, but Sirius caught him around the chest and threw him back. Sorry. "Leave it to me. Run." There was a terrible snarling noise. Lupin's head was lengthening, so was his body. His shoulders were hunching. Hair was sprouting visibly on his face and hands, which were curling into clawed paws. Crookshank's hair was on end again. He was backing away. As the werewolf reared, snapping its long jaws, Sirius disappeared from Harry's sight. He had transformed. The enormous, bear-like dog bounded forward. As the werewolf wrenched itself free of the manacle binding it, the dog seized it about the neck and pulled it backward, away from Ron and Pettigrew. They were locked, jaw to jaw, claws ripping at each other. Harry stood, transfixed by the sight, too intent upon the battle to notice anything else. It was Hermione's scream that alerted him. Pettigrew had dived for Lupin's dropped wand. Ron, unsteady on his bandaged leg, fell. There was a bang, a burst of light, and Ron lay motionless on the ground. Another bang. Crookshanks flew into the air and back to the earth in a heap. "Expelliarmus!" Harry yelled, pointing his own wand at Pettigrew. Lupin's wand flew high into the air and out of sight. "Stay where you are," Harry shouted, running forward. Too late. Pettigrew had transformed. Harry saw his bald tail whip through the manacle on Ron's outstretched arm and heard a scurrying through the grass. There was a howl and a rumbling growl. Harry turned to see the werewolf taking flight. It was galloping into the forest. "Sirius, he's gone. Pettigrew transformed," Harry yelled. Sirius was bleeding. There were gashes across his muzzle and back, but at Harry's words he scrambled up again, and in an instant the sound of his paws faded to silence as he pounded away across the grounds. Harry and Hermione dashed over to Ron. "What did he do to him?" Hermione whispered. Ron's eyes were only half closed, his mouth hung open. He was definitely alive. They could hear him breathing, but he didn't seem to recognize them. "I don't know." Harry looked desperately around. Black and Lupin both gone. They had no one but Snape for company, still hanging unconscious in midair. "We'd better get them up to the castle and tell someone," said Harry, pushing his hair out of his eyes, trying to think straight. "Come." But then, from beyond the range of their vision, they heard a yelping, a whining, a dog in pain. "Sirius," Harry muttered, staring into the darkness. He had a moment's indecision, but there was nothing they could do for Ron at the moment, and by the sound of it, Black was in trouble. Harry set off at a run, Hermione right behind him. The yelping seemed to be coming from near the lake. They pelted toward it, and Harry, running flat out, felt the cold without realizing what it must mean. The yelping stopped abruptly. As they reached the lake shore, they saw why. Sirius had turned back into a man. He was crouched on all fours, his hands over his head. "No," he moaned. "No, please." And then Harry saw them. Dementors, at least 100 of them, gliding in a black mass around the lake toward them. He spun around, the familiar, icy cold penetrating his insides, fog starting to obscure his vision. More were appearing out of the darkness on every side. They were encircling them. "Hermione, think of something happy," Harry yelled, raising his wand, blinking furiously to try and clear his vision, shaking his head to rid it of the faint screaming that had started inside. "I'm going to live with my grandfather. I'm leaving the Dursleys." He forced himself to think of Sirius, and only Sirius, and began to chant, "Expecto Patronum, Expecto Patronum." Black gave a shudder, rolled over, and lay motionless on the ground, pale as death. "He'll be all right. I'm going to go and live with him. Expecto Patronum. Hermione, help me. Expecto Patronum." "Expecto," Hermione whispered. "Expecto, Expecto," but she couldn't do it. The Dementors were closing in, barely 10 feet from them. They formed a solid wall around Harry and Hermione and were getting closer. "Expecto Patronum," Harry yelled, trying to blot the screaming from his ears. "Expecto Patronum." A thin wisp of silver escaped his wand and hovered like mist before him. At the same moment, Harry felt Hermione collapse next to him. He was alone. Completely alone. Harry felt his knees hit the cold grass. Fog was clouding his eyes. With a huge effort, he fought to remember. Sirius was innocent. Innocent. We'll be okay. I'm going to live with him. Expecto Patronum, he gasped. By the feeble light of his formless Patronus, he saw a Dementor halt, very close to him. It couldn't walk through the cloud of silver mist Harry had conjured. A dead, slimy hand slid out from under the cloak. It made a gesture as though to sweep the Patronus aside. No, he's innocent. Expecto Patronum. He could feel them watching him, hear their rattling breath like an evil wind around him. The nearest Dementor seemed to be considering him. Then it raised both its rotting hands and lowered its hood. Where there should have been eyes, there was only thin, gray, scabbed skin, stretched blankly over empty sockets. But there was a mouth, a gaping, shapeless hole, sucking the air with the sound of a death rattle. A paralyzing terror filled Harry so that he couldn't move or speak. His Patronus flickered and died. White fog was blinding him. He had to fight. Expecto Patronum. He couldn't see, and in the distance he heard the familiar screaming. Expecto Patronum. He groped in the mist for Sirius and found his arm. They weren't going to take him. But a pair of strong, clammy hands suddenly attached themselves around Harry's neck. They were forcing his face upward. He could feel its breath. It was going to get rid of him first. He could feel its putrid breath. His mother was screaming in his ears. She was going to be the last thing he ever heard. And then, through the fog that was drowning him, he thought he saw a silvery light growing brighter and brighter. He felt himself fall forward onto the grass. Face down, too weak to move, sick and shaking, Harry opened his eyes. The Dementor must have released him. The blinding light was illuminating the grass around him. The scream had stopped. The cold was ebbing away. Something was driving the Dementors back. It was circling around him and Sirius and Hermione. The rattling, sucking sounds of the Dementors were fading. They were leaving. The air was warm again. With every ounce of strength he could muster, Harry raised his head a few inches and saw an animal amid the light, galloping away across the lake. Eyes blurred with sweat. Harry tried to make out what it was. It was as bright as a unicorn. Fighting to stay conscious, Harry watched it canter to a halt as it reached the opposite shore. For a moment, Harry saw it. By its brightness, somebody welcoming it back, raising his hand to pat it, someone who looked strangely familiar. But it couldn't be. Harry didn't understand. He couldn't think anymore. He felt the last of his strength leave him, and his head hit the ground as he fainted. What's happening? So is there 21 or 22 chapters? There's 22. We are reading all three. Let's do it. Hermione's Secret. Shocking business. Shocking. Miracle none of them died. Never heard the like. By thunder, it was lucky you were there, Snape. Thank you, Minister. Order of Merlin, 2nd class, I'd say. 1st class, if I can wangle it. Thank you very much indeed, Minister. Nasty cut you've got there. Black's work, I suppose. As a matter of fact, it was Potter, Weasley, and Granger, Minister. No! Black had bewitched them. I saw it immediately. A confidence charm. To judge by their behavior, they seemed to think there was a possibility he was innocent. They weren't responsible for their actions. On the other hand, their interference might have permitted Black to escape. They obviously thought they were going to catch Black single-handed. They've got away with a great deal before now. I'm afraid it's given them a rather high opinion of themselves. And of course Potter has always been allowed an extraordinary amount of license by the headmaster. Ah, well, Snape. Harry Potter, you know. We've all got a bit of a blind spot where he's concerned. And yet, is it good for him to be given so much special treatment? Personally, I try and treat him like any other student. And any other student would be suspended, at the very least, for leading his friends into such a danger. Consider, Minister, against all school rules, after all the precautions put in place for his protection, out of bounds at night, consorting with a werewolf and a murderer, and I have reason to believe he has been visiting Hogsmeade illegally too. Well, well. We shall see, Snape, we shall see. The boy has undoubtedly been foolish. Harry lay listening with his eyes tight shut. He felt very groggy. The words he was hearing seemed to be traveling very slowly from his ears to his brain, so that it was difficult to understand. His limbs felt like lead, his eyelids too heavy to lift. He wanted to lie here, on this comfortable bed, forever. What amazes me most is the behavior of the Dementors. You've really no idea what made them retreat, Snape. No, Minister. By the time I had come round, they were heading back to their positions at the entrances. Extraordinary, and yet Black and Harry and the girl, all unconscious by the time I reached them. I bound and gagged Black, naturally, conjured stretchers, and brought them all straight back to the castle. There was a pause. Harry's brain seemed to be moving a little faster, and as it did, a gnawing sensation grew in the pit of his stomach. He opened his eyes. Everything was slightly blurred. Somebody had removed his glasses. He was lying in the dark hospital wing. At the very end of the ward, he could make out Madame Pomfrey with her back to him, bending over a bed. Harry squinted. Ron's red hair was visible beneath Madame Pomfrey's arm. Harry moved his head over on the pillow. In the bed to his right lay Hermione. Moonlight was falling across her bed. Her eyes were open too. She looked petrified, and when she saw that Harry was awake, pressed a finger to her lips, then pointed to the hospital wing door. It was ajar, and the voices of Cornelius, Fudge, and Snape were coming through it from the corridor outside. Madame Pomfrey now came walking briskly up the dark ward to Harry's bed. He turned to look at her. She was carrying the largest block of chocolate he had ever seen in his life. It looked like a small boulder. "Ah, you're awake," she said briskly. She placed the chocolate on Harry's bedside table and began breaking it apart with a small hammer. "How's Ron?" said Harry and Hermione together. "He'll live," said Madame Pomfrey. "As for you two, You'll be staying here until I'm satisfied you're... Potter, what do you think you're doing? Harry was sitting up, putting his glasses back on and picking up his wand. I need to see the headmaster, he said. Potter, said Madame Pomfrey soothingly. It's all right. They've got Black. He's locked away upstairs. The Dementors will be performing the kiss any moment now. What? Harry jumped out of bed. Hermione had done the same, but his shout had been heard in the corridor outside. Next second, Cornelius Fudge and Snape had entered the ward. Harry, what's this? Said Fudge, looking agitated. You should be in bed. Has he had any chocolate? He asked Madame Pomfrey anxiously. Minister, listen. Sirius Black's innocent. Peter Pettigrew faked his own death. We saw him tonight. You can't let the Dementors do that thing to Sirius. But Fudge was shaking his head with a small smile on his face. Harry, you're very confused. You've been through a dreadful ordeal. Lie back down now. We've got everything under control. You haven't. You've got the wrong man. Minister, please, listen. She had hurried to Harry's side and was gazing imploringly into Fudge's face. I saw him too. He was Ron's rat. He's an enigma, an animagus, Pettigrew, and... You see, Minister, said Snape, confounded. Both of them. Black's done a very good job on them. We're not confounded, Harry roared. Minister, Professor, said Madame Pomfrey angrily, I must insist that you leave. Potter is my patient, and he should not be distressed. I'm not distressed. I'm trying to tell them what happened, Harry said furiously. If they'd just listen. But Madame Pomfrey suddenly stuffed a large chunk of chocolate into Harry's mouth. He choked, and she seized the opportunity to force him back onto the bed. Now, please, Minister, these children need care. Please leave. The door opened again. It was Dumbledore. Harry swallowed his mouthful of chocolate with great difficulty and got up again. Professor Dumbledore, Sirius Black. For heaven's sake, said Madame Pomfrey hysterically, is this a hospital wing or not? Headmaster, I must insist. My apologies, Poppy, but I need a word with Mr. Potter and Miss Granger, said Dumbledore calmly. I have just been talking to Sirius Black. I suppose he's told you the same fairy tale he's planted in Potter's mind, spat Snape. Something about a rat and Pettigrew being alive. That, indeed, is Black's story, said Dumbledore, surveying Snape closely through his half-moon spectacles. And does my evidence count for nothing? Snarled Snape. Peter Pettigrew was not in the shrieking shack, nor did I see any sign of him on the grounds. That was because you were knocked out, Professor. Oh, sorry. That's because you were knocked out, Professor, said Hermione earnestly. You didn't arrive in time to hear... Miss Granger, hold your tongue. Now, Snape, said Fudge, startled, the young lady is disturbed in her mind. We must make allowances. I would like to speak to Harry and Hermione alone, said Dumbledore abruptly. Cornelius, Severus, Poppy, please leave us. Headmaster, sputtered Madame Pomfrey. They need treatment. They need rest. This cannot wait, said Dumbledore. I must insist. Madame Pomfrey pursed her lips and strode away into her office at the end of the ward, slamming the door behind her. Fudge consulted the large gold pocket watch dangling from his waistcoat. The Dementors should have arrived by now, he said. I'll go and meet them. Dumbledore, I'll see you upstairs. He crossed to the door and held it open for Snape, but Snape hadn't moved. You surely don't believe a word of Black's story, Snape whispered, his eyes fixed on Dumbledore's face. I wish to speak to Harry and Hermione alone, Dumbledore repeated. Snape took a step toward Dumbledore. Sirius Black showed he was capable of murder at the age of 16, he breathed. You haven't forgotten that, Headmaster. You haven't forgotten that he tried to kill me once. My memory is as good as it ever was, Severus, said Dumbledore quietly. Snape turned on his heel and marched through the door Fudge was still holding. It closed behind him, and Dumbledore turned to Harry and Hermione. They both burst into speech at the same time. Professor Black's telling the truth. We saw Pettigrew. He escaped when Professor Lupin turned into a werewolf. He's a rat. Pettigrew's finger, he cut it off. Pettigrew attacked Ron. It wasn't serious. But Dumbledore held up his hand to stem the flood of explanations. It is your turn to listen, and I beg you will not interrupt me, because there is very little time, he said quietly. There is not a shred of proof to support Black's story except your word, and the word of two 13-year-old wizards will not convince anybody. A street full of eyewitnesses swore they saw Sirius murder Pettigrew. I myself gave evidence to the ministry that Sirius had been the Potter's secret keeper. Professor Lupin can tell you, Harry said, unable to stop himself. Professor Lupin is currently deep in the forest, unable to tell anyone anything. By the time he is human again, it will be too late. Sirius will be worse than dead. I might add that their werewolves are so mistrusted by most of our kind that his support will count for very little, and the fact that he and Sirius are old friends. But listen to me, Harry. It is too late. You understand me? You must see that Professor Snape's version of events is far more convincing than yours. He hates it. He hates Sirius, Hermione said desperately. All because of some stupid trick Sirius played on him. Sirius has not acted like an innocent man. The attack on the fat lady, entering Gryffindor Tower with a knife, without Pettigrew, alive or dead. We have no chance of overturning Sirius's sentence. But you believe us. Yes, I do, said Dumbledore quietly. But I have no power to make other men see the truth, or to overrule the Minister of Magic. Harry stared up into the grave face and felt as though the ground beneath him were falling sharply away. He had grown used to the idea that Dumbledore could solve anything. He had expected Dumbledore to pull some amazing solution out of thin air. But no, their last hope was gone. What we need, said Dumbledore slowly, and his light blue eyes moved from Harry to Hermione, is more time. But, Hermione began, and then her eyes became very round. Oh! Now, pay attention, said Dumbledore, speaking very low and very clearly. Sirius is locked in Professor Flitwick's office on the 7th floor, 13 window from the right of the West Tower. If all goes well, you will be able to save more than one innocent life tonight. But remember this, both of you. You must not be seen. Miss Granger, you know the law. You know what is at stake. You must not be seen. Harry didn't have a clue what was going on. Dumbledore had turned on his heel and looked back as he reached the door. I'm going to lock you in. It is, he consulted his watch, 5 minutes to midnight. Miss Granger, 3 turns should do it. Good luck. Good luck, Harry repeated as the door closed behind him. 3 turns, what's he talking about? What are we supposed to do? But Hermione was fumbling with the neck of her robes, pulling from beneath them a very long, very fine gold chain. Harry, come here, she said urgently. Quick! Harry moved toward her, completely bewildered. She was holding the chain out. He saw a tiny, sparkling hourglass hanging from it. Here. She had thrown the chain around his neck, too. Ready? What are we doing? Harry said, completely lost. Hermione turned the hourglass over 3 times. The dark ward dissolved. Harry had the sensation that he was flying very fast, backward. A blur of colors and shapes rushed past him. His ears were pounding. He tried to yell but couldn't hear his own voice. And then he felt solid ground beneath his feet, and everything came into focus again. He was standing next to Hermione in the deserted entrance hall, and a stream of golden sunlight was falling across the paved floor from the open front doors. He looked wildly around at Hermione, the chain of the hourglass cutting into his neck. Hermione, what? In here. Hermione seized Harry's arm and dragged him across the hall to the door of a broom closet. She opened it, pushed him inside among the buckets and the mops, then slammed the door behind them. What? How? Hermione, what happened? We've gone back in time, Hermione whispered, lifting the chain off Harry's neck in the darkness. 3 hours back. Harry found his own leg and gave it a very hard pinch. It hurt a lot, which seemed to rule out the possibility that he was having a very bizarre dream. But, shh, listen. Someone's coming. I think it might be us. Hermione had her ear pressed against the cupboard door. Footsteps across the hall. Yes, I think it's going down to Hagrid's. Are you telling me that we're in this cupboard and we're out there too? Yes, said Hermione, her ear still glued to the cupboard door. I'm sure it's us. It doesn't sound like more than 3 people, and we're walking slowly because we're under the invisibility cloak. She broke off, still listening intently. We've gone down the front steps. Hermione sat down on an upturned bucket, looked desperately anxious, but Harry wanted a few questions answered. Where did you get that hourglass thing? It's called the Time Turner, Hermione whispered, and I got it from Professor McGonagall on her first day back. I've been using it all year to get to all my lessons. Professor McGonagall made me swear I wouldn't tell anyone. She had to write all sorts of letters to the Ministry of Magic so I could have one. She had to tell them I was a model student and that I'd never, ever use it for anything except my studies. I've been turning it back so I could do hours over again. That's how I've been doing several lessons at once, see? But, Harry, I don't understand what Dumbledore wants us to do. Why did he tell us to go back 3 hours? How's that going to help Sirius? Harry stared at her shadowy face. There must be something that happened around now he wants us to change. What happened? We were walking down to Hagrid's 3 hours ago. This is 3 hours ago, and we are walking down to Hagrid's. We just heard ourselves leaving. Harry frowned. He felt as though he were screwing up his whole brain in concentration. Dumbledore just said we could save more than one innocent life. And then it hit him. Hermione, we're going to save Buckbeak. But how will that help Sirius? Dumbledore said. He just told us where the window is. The window of Flitwick's office. Where they've got Sirius locked up. We've got to fly Buckbeak up to the window and rescue Sirius. Sirius can escape on Buckbeak, then can escape together. From what Harry could see of Hermione's face, she looked terrified. If we manage that without being seen, it'll be a miracle. Well, we've got to try, haven't we? Said Harry. He stood up and pressed his ear against the door. Doesn't sound like anyone's there. Come on, let's go. So all of this stuff only happened in 3 hours? Like, what? That's insane. Harry pushed open the closet door. The entrance hall was deserted. As quietly and quickly as they could, they darted out of the closet and down the stone steps. The shadows were already lengthening. The tops of the trees in the Forbidden Forest gilded once more with gold. If anyone's looking out of the window, Hermione squeaked, looking up at the castle behind them. We'll run for it, said Harry determinedly. Straight into the forest, all right. We'll have to hide behind a tree or something and keep a lookout. Okay, but we'll go around by the greenhouses, said Hermione breathlessly. We need to keep out of sight of Hagrid's front door, or we'll see us. We must be nearly at Hagrid's by now. Still working out what she meant, Harry set off at a sprint, Hermione behind him. They tore across the vegetable gardens to the greenhouses, paused for a moment behind them, then set off again, fast as they could, skirting around the Whomping Willow, tearing toward the shelter of the forest. Safe in the shadow of the trees, Harry turned around. Seconds later, Hermione arrived behind him, panting. Right. We need to sneak over to Hagrid's. Keep out of sight, Harry. They made their way silently through the trees, keeping to the very edge of the forest. Then, as they glimpsed the front of Hagrid's house, they heard a knock upon his door. They moved quickly behind a wide oak trunk and peered out from either side. Hagrid had appeared in his doorway, shaking and white, looking around to see who had knocked, and Harry heard his own voice. It's us. We're wearing the invisibility cloak. Let us in and we can take it off. You shouldn't have come, Hagrid whispered. He stood back, then shut the door quickly. This is the weirdest thing we've ever done, Harry said fervently. Let's move along a bit, Hermione whispered. We need to get nearer to Buckbeak. They crept through the trees until they saw the nervous hippogriff tethered to the fence around Hagrid's pumpkin patch. Now, Harry whispered. No, said Hermione. If we steal him now, those committee people will think Hagrid set him free. We've got to wait until they've seen he's tied outside. That's going to give us about 60 seconds, said Harry. This was starting to seem impossible. At that moment, there was a crash of breaking china from inside Hagrid's cabin. That's Hagrid breaking the milk jug, Hermione whispered. I'm going to find Scabbers in a moment. Sure enough, a few minutes later, they heard Hermione's shriek of surprise. Hermione, said Harry suddenly, what if we just run in there and grab Pettigrew? No, said Hermione in a terrified whisper. Don't you understand? We're breaking one of the most important wizarding laws. Nobody's supposed to change time. Nobody. You heard Dumbledore. If we're seen, we'd only be seen by ourselves and Hagrid. Harry, what do you think you'd do if you saw yourself bursting into Hagrid's house? Said Hermione. I think I'd gone mad, said Harry. Or I think there was some dark magic going on. Exactly. You wouldn't understand. You might even attack yourself. Don't you see? Professor McGonagall told me what awful things have happened when wizards have meddled with time. Loads of them ended up killing their past or future selves by mistake. Okay, said Harry. It was just an idea. I just thought... But Hermione nudged him and pointed toward the castle. Harry moved his head a few inches to get a clear view of the distant front doors. Dumbledore, Fudge, the old committee member, and McNair, the executioner, were coming down the steps. We're about to come out, Hermione breathed. And sure enough, moments later, Hagrid's back door opened, and Harry saw himself, Ron, and Hermione walking out of it with Hagrid. It was, without a doubt, the strangest sensation of his life, standing behind the tree and watching himself in the pumpkin patch. It's okay, Beaky. It's okay, Hagrid said to Buckbeak. Then he turned to Harry, Ron, and Hermione. Go on, get going. Hagrid, we can't. We'll tell them what really happened. They can't kill him. Go. It's bad enough without you lot in trouble and all. Harry watched Hermione and the pumpkin patch throw the invisibility cloak over him and Ron. Go quick. Don't listen. There was a knock on Hagrid's front door. The execution party had arrived. Hagrid turned around and headed back into his cabin, leaving the back door ajar. Harry watched the grass flatten in patches all around the cabin and heard 3 pairs of feet retreating. He, Ron, and Hermione had gone. But the Harry and Hermione hidden in the trees could now hear what was happening inside the cabin through the back door. "Where's the beast?" came the cold voice of McNair. Outside," Hagrid croaked. As I'm croaking. I'm going to stream, and then all that stuff that comes up, it's kind of like that 3 hours. Keep it the frick up, Doug. True, Aster. Harry pulled his head out of sight as McNair's face appeared at Hagrid's window, staring out at Buckbeak. Then they heard Fudge. "We have to read you the official notice of execution, Hagrid. I'll make it quick. And then you and McNair need to sign it. McNair, you're supposed to listen too. That's procedure." McNair's face vanished from the window. It was now or never. "Wait here," Harry whispered to Hermione. "I'll do it." As Fudge's voice started again, Harry darted out from behind his tree, vaulted the fence into the pumpkin patch, and approached Buckbeak. "It is the decision of the Committee for the Disposal of Dangerous Creatures that the Hippogriff Buckbeak, hereafter called the Condemned, shall be executed on the 6th of June at sundown." Careful not to blink, Harry stared up at Buckbeak's fierce orange eyes once more and bowed. Buckbeak sank to his scaly knees and then stood up again. Harry began to fumble with the knot of the rope tying Buckbeak to the fence. "Sentenced to execution by beheading, to be carried out by the committee's appointed executioner, Walden McNair." "Come on, Buckbeak," Harry murmured. "Come on, we're going to help you. Quietly, quietly. As witnessed below. Hagrid, you sign here." Harry threw all his weight onto the rope, but Buckbeak had dug in his front feet. "Well, let's get this over with," said the reedy voice of committee member from inside Hagrid's cabin. "Hagrid, perhaps it will be better if you stay inside." "No, I want to be with him. I don't want her to be alone. I want him to be alone." Footsteps echoed from within the cabin. "Buckbeak, move!" Harry hissed. Harry tugged harder on the rope around Buckbeak's neck. The hippogriff began to walk, rustling its wings irritably. They were still 10 feet away from the forest, in plain view of Hagrid's back door. "One moment, please, McNair," came Dumbledore's voice. "You need to sign too." The footsteps stopped. Harry heaved on the rope. Buckbeak snapped his beak and walked a little faster. Hermione's white face was sticking out from behind a tree. "Harry, hurry," she mouthed. Harry could still hear Dumbledore's voice talking from within the cabin. He gave the rope another wrench. Buckbeak broke into a grudging trot. They had reached the trees. "Quick, quick," Hermione moaned, darting out from behind her tree, seizing the rope too and adding her weight to the Buckbeak to make Buckbeak move faster. Harry looked over his shoulder. They were now blocked from sight. They couldn't see Hagrid's garden at all. "Stop," he whispered to Hermione. "They might hear us." Hagrid's back door had opened with a bang. Harry, Hermione, and Buckbeak stood quite still. Even the hippogriff seemed to be listening intently. Silence. Then, "Where is it?" said the reedy voice of the committee member. "Where is the beast?" "It was tied here," said the executioner furiously. "I saw it. Just here." "How extraordinary." There was a note of amusement in his voice. "Beaky," said Hagrid huskily. There was a swishing noise and the thud of an axe. The executioner seemed to have swung it into the fence in anger, and then came the howling. And this time they could hear Hagrid's words through sobs. "Gone! Gone! Bless his little beak, he's gone! Must have pulled himself free. Beaky, you're a clever boy." Buckbeak started to strain against the rope, trying to get back to Hagrid. Harry and Hermione tightened their grip and dug their heels into the forest floor to stop him. "Someone untied him," the executioner was snarling. "We should search the grounds, the forest. McNair, if Buckbeak has indeed been stolen, do you really think the thief will have led him away on foot?" said Dumbledore, still sounding amused. "Search the skies, if you will. Hagrid, I could do with a cup of tea. Or a large brandy." Of course, Professor," said Hagrid, who sounded weak with happiness. Come in, come in." Harry and Hermione listened closely. They heard footsteps, the soft cursing of the executioner, the snap of the door, and then silence once more. I can't read. "Is a beak keeper?" "Now what?" whispered Harry, looking around.
We'll have to hide in here, said Hermione, who looked very shaken. We need to wait until they've gone back to the castle. Then we wait until it's safe to fly Buckbeak up to Sirius's window. He won't be there for another couple hours. Oh, this is going to be difficult. She looked nervously over her shoulder into the depths of the forest. The sun was setting now. We're going to have to move, said Harry, thinking hard. We've got to be able to see the Whomping Willow, or we won't know what's going on. Okay, said Hermione, getting a firmer grip on Buckbeak's rope. But we've got to keep out of sight. Harry, remember. They moved around the edge of the forest, darkness falling thickly around them, until they were hidden behind a clump of trees, through which they could make out the willow. There's Ron, said Harry suddenly. A dark figure was sprinting across the lawn, and its shout echoed through the still night air. Get away from him! Get away! Scabbers, come here! And then they saw two more figures materialize out of nowhere. Harry watched himself and Hermione chasing after Ron. Then he saw Ron dive. Gotcha! Get off, you stinking cat! They're serious, said Harry. The great shape of the dog had bounded out from the roots of the willow. They saw him bowl Harry over, then seize Ron. Looks even worse from there, doesn't it? Said Harry, watching the dog pulling Ron into the roots. Ouch. Look, I just got walloped by the tree, and so did you. This is weird. The Whomping Willow was creaking and lashing out with its lower branches. They could see themselves darting here and there, trying to reach the trunk, and then the tree froze. That was Crookshanks pressing the knot, said Hermione. And there we go, Harry muttered. We're in. The moment they disappeared, the tree began to move again. Seconds later, they heard footsteps quite close by. Dumbledore, McNair, Fudge, and the old committee member were making their way up to the castle. Right after we got down into the passage, said Hermione. If only Dumbledore had come with us. McNair and Fudge would have come too, said Harry bitterly. I bet you anything Fudge would have told McNair to murder Sirius on the spot. They watched the four men climb the castle steps and disappear from view. For a few minutes, the scene was deserted. Then, Here comes Lupin, said Harry as they saw another figure sprinting down the stone steps and herring toward the willow. Harry looked up at the sky. Clouds were obscuring the moon completely. They watched Lupin seize a broken branch from the ground and prod the knot on the trunk. The tree stopped fighting, and Lupin, too, disappeared into the gap in its roots. If you'd only grabbed the cloak, said Harry. It's just lying there. He turned to Hermione. If I just dashed out now and grabbed it, Snape, he'd never be able to get it, and... Harry, we mustn't be seen. How can you stand this? He asked Hermione fiercely. Just standing here and watching what happened. He hesitated. I'm going to grab the cloak. Harry, no! Hermione seized the back of Harry's robes, not a moment too soon. Just then, they heard a burst of song. It was Hagrid, making his way up to the castle, singing at the top of his voice, and weaving slightly as he walked. A large bottle was swinging from his hands. See, Hermione whispered. See what would have happened. We've got to keep out of sight. No, Buckbeak. The Hippogriff was making frantic attempts to get to Hagrid again. Harry seized his rope, too, straining to hold Buckbeak back. Good night, Chris. The Hippogriff was making... Harry seized his rope. They watched Hagrid meander tipsily up to the castle. He was gone. Buckbeak stopped fighting to get away. His head dropped sadly. Barely 2 minutes later, the castle doors flew open yet again, and Snape came charging out of them, running toward the willow. Harry's fists clenched as they watched Snape skid to a halt next to the tree, looking around. He grabbed the cloak and held it up. Get your filthy hands off of it, Harry snarled under his breath. Shh! Snape seized the branch Lupin had used to freeze the tree, prodded the knot, and vanished from view as he put on the cloak. So that's it, said Hermione quietly. We're all down there. And now we've just got to wait until we come back up again. She took the end of Buckbeak's rope and tied it securely around the nearest tree, then sat down on the dry ground, arms around her knees. Harry, there's something I don't understand. Why didn't the Dementors get Sirius? I remember them coming, and then I think I passed out. There were so many of them. Harry sat down too. He explained what he'd seen, how, as the nearest Dementor had lowered its mouth to Harry's, a large silver something had come galloping across the lake and forced the Dementors to retreat. Hermione's mouth was slightly open by the time Harry had finished. But what was it? There was only one thing it could have been. To make the Dementors go, said Harry. A real Patronus. A powerful one. But who conjured it? Harry didn't say anything. He was thinking back to the person he'd seen on the other bank of the lake. He knew who he thought it had been, but how could it have been? Are we thinking it's Lupin? Didn't you see what they looked like? Said Hermione eagerly. Was it one of the teachers? No, it wasn't a teacher. But it must have been a really powerful wizard to drive all those Dementors away. If the Patronus was shining so brightly, didn't it light him up? Couldn't you see? Yeah, I saw him, said Harry slowly, but maybe I imagined it. I wasn't thinking straight. I passed out right afterward. Who do you think it was? I knew it. Ugh. I think, Harry swallowed, knowing how strange this was going to sound. I think it was my dad. Harry glanced up at Hermione and saw that her mouth was fully open now. She was gazing at him with a mixture of alarm and pity. Harry, your dad's, well, dead, she said quietly. I know that, said Harry quickly. You think you saw a ghost? No, I don't know. No, he looked solid, but then maybe I was seeing things, said Harry, but from what I could see, it looked like him. I've got photos of him. Hermione was still looking at him as though worried about his sanity. I know it sounds crazy, said Harry flatly. He turned to look at Buckbeak, who was digging his beak into the ground, apparently searching for worms, but he wasn't really watching Buckbeak. He was thinking about his father and about his 3 oldest friends, Moony, Wormtail, Padfoot, and Prongs. Had all 4 of them been out on the grounds tonight? Wormtail had reappeared this evening when everyone had thought he was dead. Was it so impossible his father had done the same? Had he been seeing things across the lake? The figure had been too far away to see distinctly, yet he had felt sure for a moment before he'd lost consciousness. The leaves overhead rustled faintly in the breeze. The moon drifted in and out of sight behind the shifting clouds. Hermione sat with her face turned toward the willow, waiting. And then, at last, after over an hour, "Here we come," Hermione whispered. She and Harry got to their feet. Buckbeak raised his head. They saw Lupin, Ron, and Pettigrew clambering awkwardly out of the hole in the roots, followed by the unconscious snake drifting weirdly upward. Next came Harry, Hermione, and Black. They all began to walk toward the castle. Harry's heart was starting to beat very fast. He glanced up at the sky. Any moment now, that cloud was going to move aside and show the moon. "Harry," Hermione muttered, as though she knew exactly what he was thinking. "We've got to stay put. We mustn't be seen. There's nothing we can do." "So we're just going to let Pettigrew escape all over again," said Harry quietly. "How do you expect to find a rat in the dark?" snapped Hermione. "There's nothing we can do. We came back to help Sirius. We're not supposed to be doing anything else." "All right." The moon slid out from behind its cloud. They saw the tiny figure across the ground stop. Then they saw movement. "There goes Lupin," Hermione whispered. "He's transforming." "Hermione," said Harry suddenly, "we've got to move." "We mustn't. I keep telling you not to interfere. Lupin's going to run into the forest right at us." Hermione gasped. "Quick," she moaned, dashing to untie Buckbeak. "Quick! Where are we going to go? Where are we going to hide? The Dementors will be coming any moment." "Back to Hagrid's," Harry said. "It's empty now. Come on." They ran as fast as they could, Buckbeak cantering along behind them. They could hear the werewolf howling behind them. The cabin was in sight. Harry skidded to the door, wrenched it open. Hermione and Buckbeak flashed past him. Harry threw himself in after them and bolted the door. Fang the boarhound barked loudly. "Shh, Fang, it's us," said Hermione, hurrying over and scratching his ears to quieten him. "That was really close," she said to Harry. "Yeah." Harry was looking out of the window. It was much harder to see what was going on from here. Buckbeak seemed very happy to find himself back inside Hagrid's house. He lay down in front of the fire, folded his wings contentedly. "He's so cute," and seemed ready for a good nap. "I think I'd better go outside again, said Harry slowly. "I can't see what's going on. We won't know when it's time." Hermione looked up. Her expression was suspicious. "I'm not going to try and interfere," said Harry quickly. "But if we don't see what's going on, how are we going to know when it's time to rescue Sirius?" "Well, okay then. I'll wait here with Buckbeak. But Harry, be careful. Be careful. There's a werewolf out there, and the Dementors." Harry stepped outside again and edged around the cabin. He could hear yelping in the distance. That meant the Dementors were closing in on Sirius. He and Hermione would be running to him any moment. Harry stared out toward the lake, his heart doing a kind of drum roll in his chest. Whoever had sent that Patronus would be appearing at any moment. For a fraction of a second he stood, irresolute, in front of Hagrid's door. He must not be seen. But he didn't want to be seen. He wanted to do the seeing. He had to know. And there were the Dementors. They were emerging out of the darkness from every direction, gliding around the edges of the lake. They were moving away from where Harry stood, to the opposite bank. He wouldn't have to get near them. Harry began to run. He had no thought in his head except his father. If it was him, if it was really him, he had to know, had to find out. The lake was coming nearer and nearer, but there was no sign of anybody. On the opposite bank, he could see tiny glimmers of silver, his own attempts at a Patronus. There was a bush at the very edge of the water. Harry threw himself behind it, peering desperately through the leaves. On the opposite bank, the glimmers of silver were suddenly extinguished. A terrified excitement shot through him. Any moment now. "Come on," he muttered, staring about. "Where are you? Dad, come on." But no one came. Harry raised his head to look at the circle of Dementors across the lake. One of them was lowering its hood. It was time for the rescuer to appear, but no one was coming to help this time. And then it hit him. He understood. He hadn't seen his father. He had seen himself. Harry flung himself out from behind the bush and pulled out his wand. "Expecto Patronum," he yelled. And out of the end of his wand burst, not a shapeless cloud of mist, but a blinding, dazzling silver animal. He screwed up his eyes, trying to see what it was. It looked like a horse. It was galloping silently away from him across the black surface of the lake. He saw it lower its head and charge at the swarming Dementors. Now it was galloping around and around the black shapes on the ground, and the Dementors were falling back, scattering, retreating into the darkness. They were gone. The Patronus turned. It was cantering back toward Harry across the still surface of the water. It wasn't a horse. It wasn't a unicorn, either. It was a stag. It was shining brightly as the moon above. It was coming back to him. It stopped on the bank. Its hooves made no mark on the soft ground as it stared at Harry with its large silver eyes. Slowly, it bowed its antlered head, and Harry realized. "Prongs," he whispered, but as his trembling fingertips stretched toward the creature, it vanished. Harry stood there, hands still outstretched. Then, with a great leap of his heart, he heard hooves behind him. He whirled around and saw Hermione dashing toward him, dragging Buckbeak behind her. "What did you do?" she said fiercely. "You said you were only going to keep a lookout." "I just saved all our lives," said Harry. "Get behind here, behind this bush, I'll explain." Hermione listened to what had just happened with her mouth open yet again. "Did anyone see you?" "Yes, haven't you been listening? I saw me, but I thought I was my dad. It's okay." "Harry, I can't believe it. You conjured up a Patronus that drove away all those Dementors. That's very, very advanced magic." "I knew I could do it this time," said Harry, "because I'd already done it. Does that make sense?" "I don't know. Harry, look at Snape." Together they peered around the bush at the other bank. Snape had regained consciousness. He was conjuring stretchers and lifting the limp forms of Harry, Hermione, and Black onto them. A fourth stretcher, no doubt bearing Ron, was already floating at his side. Then, wand held out in front of him, he moved them away toward the castle. "Right. It's nearly time," said Hermione tensely, looking at her watch. "We've got about 45 minutes until Dumbledore locks the door to the hospital wing. We've got to rescue Sirius and get back into the ward before anybody realizes we're missing." They waited, watching the moving clouds reflected in the lake, while the bush next to them whispered in the breeze. Buckbeak, bored, was ferreting for worms again. "Do you reckon he's up there yet?" said Harry, checking his watch. He looked up at the castle and began counting the windows to the right of the west tower. "Look," Hermione whispered. "Who's that? Someone's coming back out of the castle." Harry stared through the darkness. The man was hurrying across the grounds toward one of the entrances. Something shiny glinted in his belt. "McNair," said Harry, "the executioner. He's gone to get the Dementors. This is it, Hermione." Hermione put her hands on Buckbeak's back, and Harry gave her a leg up. Then he placed his foot on one of the lower branches of the bush and climbed up in front of her. He pulled Buckbeak's rope back over his neck and tied it to the other side of his collar like reins. "Ready?" he whispered to Hermione. "You'd better hold on to me." He nudged Buckbeak's sides with his heels. Buckbeak soared straight into the air. Harry gripped his flanks with his knees, feeling the great wings rising powerfully beneath them. Hermione was holding Harry very tight around the waist. He could hear her muttering, "Oh no, I don't like this. I really don't like this. Hi, Hummer." "Hi, Ryan." Harry urged Buckbeak forward. They were gliding quietly toward the upper floors of the castle. Harry pulled hard on the left-hand side of the rope, and Buckbeak turned. Harry was trying to count the windows flashing past. "Whoa," he said, pulling backward as hard as he could. Buckbeak slowed down, and they found themselves at a stop, unless you've counted the fact that they kept rising up and down several feet as the hippogriff beat his wings to remain airborne. "He's there," Harry said, spotting Sirius as they rose up beside the window. He reached out, and as Buckbeak's wings fell, was able to tap sharply on the glass. Black looked up. Harry saw his jaw drop. He leapt from his chair, hurried to the window, and tried to open it, but it was locked. "Stand back," Hermione called to him, and she took out her wand. Still gripping... My accent has just been ridiculous. Hey, Gnome, what's up, dude? My accent has just been so ridiculous today. It's been everywhere. Alohomora. The window sprang open. "How?" said Black weakly, staring at the hippogriff. "Get on, there's not much time," said Harry, gripping Buckbeak firmly on either side of his sleek neck to hold him steady. "We've got to get out of here. The Dementors are coming. McNair's gone to get them." Black placed a hand on either side of the window frame and heaved his head and shoulders out of it. It was very lucky he was so thin. In seconds, he had managed to fling one leg over Buckbeak's back and pull himself onto the hippogriff behind Hermione. "Okay, Buckbeak, up," said Harry, shaking the rope. "Up to the tower, come on." The hippogriff gave one sweep of its mighty wings, and they were soaring upward again, high as the top of the West Tower. Buckbeak landed with a clatter on the battlements, and Harry and Hermione slid off him at once. "Sirius, you better go quick," Harry panted. "They'll reach Flitwick's office any moment. They'll find out you're gone." Buckbeak pawed the ground, tossing his sharp head. "What happened to the other boy? Ron," croaked Sirius. "He's going to be okay. He's still out of it, but Madame Pomfrey says she'll be able to make him better. Quick, go." But Black was still staring down at Harry. "How can I ever think—" "Go!" Harry and Hermione shouted together. Black wheeled Buckbeak around, facing the open sky. "We'll see each other again," he said. "You are truly your father's son, Harry." He squeezed Buckbeak's sides with his heels. Harry and Hermione jumped back as the enormous wings rose once more. The hippogriff took off into the air. He and his rider became smaller and smaller as Harry gazed after them. Then a cloud drifted across the moon. They were gone. Yes, I was about to be so sad. That's what I was realizing was the Dementors, and that chapter was called The Dementor's Kiss. So when they were coming out, I didn't think of Lupin changing. I thought it was the Dementors coming to kill Sirius right after they were like, "Harry, you're gonna live with me," and Harry's all happy and stuff. All right, last chapter, guys. Last heckin' chapter. See how many pages we have. We got 20 pages to read, my dudes. Are we ready? We ready? Owl post again. "Harry," Hermione was tugging at his sleeve, staring at her watch. "We've got exactly 10 minutes to get back down to the hospital wing without anybody seeing us, before Dumbledore locks the door." "Okay," said Harry, wrenching his gaze from the sky. "Let's go." They slipped through the doorway behind them and down a tightly spiraling stone staircase. As they reached the bottom of it, they heard voices. They flattened themselves against the wall and listened. It sounded like Fudge and Snape. They were walking quickly along the corridor at the foot of the staircase. "Only hope Dumbledore's not going to make difficulties," Snape was saying. "The kiss will be performed immediately. As soon as McNair returns with the Dementors. This whole Black affair has been highly embarrassing. I can't tell you how much I'm looking forward to informing the Daily Prophet that we've got him at last. I dare say they'll want to interview Snape, and once young Harry's back in his right mind, I expect he'll want to tell the Prophet exactly how you saved him." "What's up, Sam?" Harry clenched his teeth. He caught a glimpse of Snape's smirk as he and Fudge passed Harry and Hermione's hiding place. Their footsteps died away. Harry and Hermione waited a few moments to make sure they'd really gone, then started to run in the opposite direction, down one staircase, then another, along a new corridor. Then they heard a cackling ahead. "Peeves," Harry muttered, grabbing Hermione's wrist. "In here." They tore into a deserted classroom to their left just in time. Peeves seemed to be bouncing along the corridor in boisterous good spirits, laughing his head off. "Oh, he's horrible. Horrible. Horrible," whispered Hermione, her ear to the door. "I bet he's all excited because the Dementors are going to finish off Sirius." She checked her watch. 3 minutes, Harry." They waited until Peeves' gloating voices had faded into the distance, then slid back out of the room and broke into a run again. "Hermione, what will happen if we don't get back inside before Dumbledore locks the door?" "I don't want to think about it," Hermione moaned, checking her watch again. 1 minute. They had reached the end of the corridor with the hospital wing entrance. "Okay, I can hear Dumbledore," said Hermione tensely. "Come on, Harry." They crept up along the corridor. The door opened. Dumbledore's back appeared. "I'm going to lock you in," they heard him saying. "It is 5 minutes to midnight. Miss Granger. 3 turns should do it. Good luck." Dumbledore backed out of the room, closed the door, and took out his wand to magically lock it. Panicking, Harry and Hermione ran forward. Dumbledore looked up, and a wide smile appeared under the long silver mustache. "Well," he said quietly. "We did it," said Harry breathlessly. "Sirius is gone, on Buckbeak." Dumbledore beamed at them. "Well done. I think—" He listened intently for any sound within the hospital wing. "Yes, I think you've gone too. Get inside. I'll lock you in." Harry and Hermione slipped back inside the dormitory. It was empty except for Ron, who was still lying motionless in the end bed. As a lock clicked behind them, Harry and Hermione crept back to their own beds, Hermione tucking the time-turner back under her robes. A moment later, Madame Pomfrey came striding back out of her office. "Did I hear the headmaster leaving? Am I allowed to look after my patients now?" She was in a very bad mood. Harry and Hermione thought it best to accept their chocolate quietly. Madame Pomfrey, and I always change between Madame and Madame. This is great. Madame Pomfrey stood over them, making sure they ate it, but Harry could hardly swallow. He and Hermione were waiting, listening, their nerves jangling, and then, as they both took a 4th piece of chocolate from Madame Pomfrey, they heard a distant roar of fury echoing from somewhere above them. "What was that?" said Madame Pomfrey in alarm. Now they could hear angry voices growing louder and louder. Madame Pomfrey was staring at the door. I hate how they always... Do we always have to call her Madame Pomfrey? Harry was trying to hear what the voices were saying. They were drawing nearer. "He must have disappeared. He must have disapparated." Is that a word? Okay. "He must have disapparated, Severus. We should have left somebody in the room with him. When this gets out..." "He didn't disapparate," Snape roared, now very close at hand. "You can't apparate or disapparate inside this castle. This has something to do with Potter." "Severus, be reasonable. Harry has been locked up." Bam! The door of the hospital wing burst open. Fudge, Snape, and Dumbledore came striding into the ward. Dumbledore alone looked calm. Indeed, he looked as though he was quite enjoying himself. Fudge appeared angry, but Snape was beside himself. "Out with it, Potter," he bellowed. "What did you do?" "Professor Snape," shrieked Madame Pomfrey, "control yourself." "See here, Snape, be reasonable," said Fudge. "This door has been locked. We just saw." "They helped him escape. I know it," Snape howled, pointing at Harry and Hermione. His face was twisted. Spit was flying from his mouth. "Calm down. You're talking nonsense," Fudge barked. "You don't know Potter." "Potter. Potter," shrieked Snape. "He did it. I know he did it." "That will do, Severus," said Dumbledore quietly. "Think about what you're saying. This door has been locked since I left the ward 10 minutes ago. But on Pomfrey, have these students left their beds?" "Of course not," said Madame Pomfrey, bristling. "I would have heard them." "Well, there you have it, Severus," said Dumbledore calmly. "Unless you are suggesting that Harry and Hermione are able to be in 2 places at once, I'm afraid I don't see any point in troubling them further." Snape stood there, seething, staring from Fudge, who looked thoroughly shocked at his behavior, to Dumbledore, whose eyes were twinkling behind his glasses. Snape swirled about, robes swishing behind him, and stormed out of the ward. "Fellow seems quite unbalanced," said Fudge, staring after him. "I'd watch out for him if I were you, Dumbledore." "Oh, he's not unbalanced," said Dumbledore quietly. "He's just suffered a severe disappointment." I thought it said he's just a severe disappointment, so... Writers. "He's not the only one," puffed Fudge. "The Daily Prophet's going to have a field day. We had Black cornered, and he slipped through our fingers yet again. All it needs now is for the story of that hippogriff's escape to get out, and I'll be a laughingstock." "Well, I better go and notify the Ministry." "And the Dementors?" said Dumbledore. "They'll be removed from the school, I trust?" "Oh, yes, they'll have to go," said Fudge, running his fingers distractedly through his hair. "Never dreamed they'd attempt to administer the kiss on an innocent boy. Completely out of control. No, I'll have them packed off back to Azkaban tonight. Perhaps we should think about dragons at the school entrance." "Hagrid would like that," said Dumbledore with a swift smile at Harry and Hermione. As he and Fudge left the dormitory, Madame Pomfrey hurried to the door and locked it again. Muttering angrily to herself, she headed back to her office. There was a low moan from the other end of the ward. Ron had woken up. They could see him sitting up, rubbing his head, looking around. What happened? He groaned. Harry, why are we in here? Where's Sirius? Where's Lupin? What's going on? Harry and Hermione looked at each other. You explain, said Harry, helping himself to some more chocolate. When Harry, Ron, and Hermione left the hospital wing at noon the next day, it was to find an almost deserted castle. The sweltering heat and the end of the exams meant that everyone was taking full advantage of another Hogsmeade visit. Neither Ron nor Hermione felt like going. However, so they and Harry wandered onto the grounds, still talking about the extraordinary events of the previous night and wondering where Sirius and Buckbeak were now. Sitting near the lake, watching the giant squid waving its tentacles lazily above the water, Harry lost the thread of the conversation as he looked across to the opposite bank. The stag had galloped toward him from there just last night. A shadow fell across them, and they looked up to see a very bleary-eyed Hagrid, mopping his sweaty face with one of his tablecloth-sized handkerchiefs and beaming down at them. No, I shouldn't feel happy after what happened last night, he said. I mean, Black escaping again and everything, but guess what? What? They said, pretending to look curious. Beaky, he escaped. He's free. Been celebrating all night. That's wonderful, said Hermione, giving Ron a reproving look because he looked as though he was close to laughing. Yeah, kind of tied him up properly, said Hagrid, gazing happily out over the grounds. I was worried this morning, mind. Thought he might have met Professor Lupin on the grounds, but Lupin says he never ate anything last night. What? Said Harry quickly. Blimey, haven't you heard? Said Hagrid, his smile fading a little. He lowered his voice, even though there was nobody in sight. Snape told all the Slytherins this morning. Thought everyone would know by now. Professor Lupin's a werewolf, see? And he was loose on the grounds last night. He's packing now, of course. He's packing? Why? Leaving, isn't he? Said Hagrid, looking surprised that Harry had to ask. Resigned first thing this morning. Says he can't risk it happening again. Harry scrambled to his feet. I'm going to see him, he said to Ron and Hermione. But if he's resigned, it doesn't sound like there's anything we can do. I don't care. I still want to see him. I'll meet you back here. Lupin's office door was open. He had already packed most of his things. The Grindylows' empty tank stood next to his battered old suitcase, which was open and nearly full. Lupin was bending over something on his desk and looked up only when Harry knocked on the door. I saw you coming, said Lupin, smiling. He pointed at the parchment he had been poring over. It was a Marauder's map. I just saw Hagrid, said Harry, and he said you've resigned. It's not true, is it? I'm afraid it is, said Lupin. He started opening his desk drawers and taking out the contents. Why? The Ministry of Magic, don't you think we're helping Sirius, do they? I don't think you are helping Sirius, do they? Lupin crossed the door and closed it behind Harry. No. Professor Dumbledore managed to convince Fudge that I was trying to save your lives, he sighed. That was the final straw for Severus. I think the loss of the Order of Merlin hit him hard. So he accidentally let slip that I'm a werewolf this morning at breakfast. You're not leaving just because of that, said Harry. Lupin smiled wryly. This time tomorrow, the owls will start arriving from parents. They will not want a werewolf teaching their children, Harry. And after last night, I see their point. I could have bitten any of you. That must never happen again. Bye, Hummer. Love you, dude. Have a good day at work. You're the best defense against the dark arts teacher we've ever had, said Harry. Don't go. Lupin shook his head and didn't speak. He carried on emptying his drawers. Then, while Harry was trying to think of a good argument to make him stay, Lupin said, From what the headmaster told me this morning, you saved a lot of lives last night, Harry. If I'm proud of anything, it's how much you've learned. Tell me about your Patronus. How'd you know about that, said Harry, distracted. What else could have driven the Dementors back? Harry told Lupin what had happened. When he'd finished, Lupin was smiling again. Yes, your father was always a stag when he transformed, he said. You guessed right. That's why we called him Prongs. Lupin threw his last few books into his case, closed the desk drawers, and turned to look at Harry. Here, I brought this from the Shrieking Shack last night, he said, handing Harry back the invisibility cloak. And he hesitated and held out the Marauder's map too. I'm no longer your teacher, so I don't feel guilty about giving you this back as well. It's no use to me, and I dare say you, Ron, and Hermione will find uses for it. Harry took the map and grinned. You told me Moony, Wormtail, Padfoot, and Prongs would have wanted to lure me out of school. You said they'd have thought it was funny. And so he would have, said Lupin, now reaching down to close his case. I have no hesitation in saying that James would have been highly disappointed if his son had never found any of these secret passages out of the castle. There was a knock on the door. Harry hastily stuffed the Marauders map and the invisibility cloak into his pocket. It was Professor Dumbledore. He didn't look surprised to see Harry there. Your carriage is at the gates, Remus, he said. Thank you, Headmaster. Lupin picked up his old suitcase and the empty Grindylow tank. Well, goodbye, Harry, he said, smiling. It has been a real pleasure teaching you. I feel sure we'll meet again sometime. Headmaster, there is no need to see me to the gates. I can manage. Harry had the impression that Lupin wanted to leave as quickly as possible. Goodbye, then, Remus, said Dumbledore soberly. Lupin shifted the Grindylow tank slightly so that he and Dumbledore could shake hands. Then, with a final nod to Harry and a swift smile, Lupin left the office. Harry sat down in his vacated chair, staring glumly at the floor. He heard the door close and looked up. Dumbledore was still there. Why so miserable, Harry? He said quietly. You should be very proud of yourself after last night. It didn't make any difference, said Harry bitterly. Pettigrew got away. Didn't make any difference, said Dumbledore quietly. How many times is Dumbledore going to say anything quietly? It made all the difference in the world. You helped uncover the truth. You saved an innocent man from a terrible fate. Terrible. Something stirred in Harry's memory, greater and more terrible than ever before. Professor Trelawney's prediction. Professor Dumbledore, yesterday when I was having my divination exam, Professor Trelawney went very, very strange. Indeed. Stranger than usual, you mean? Yes. Her voice went all deep and her eyes rolled and she said, she said Voldemort's servant was going to set out to return to him before midnight. She said the servant would help him come back to power. Harry stared up at Dumbledore, and then she sort of became normal again, and she couldn't remember anything she'd said. Was she making a real prediction? Dumbledore looked mildly impressed. Do you know, Harry, I think she might have been, he said thoughtfully. Who'd have thought it? That brings her total of real predictions up to 2. I should offer her a pay raise. But Harry looked at him aghast. How could Dumbledore take this so calmly? But I stopped Sirius and Professor Lupin from killing Pettigrew. That makes it my fault if Voldemort comes back. It does not, said Dumbledore. Quietly. Hasn't your experience with the Time Turner taught you anything, Harry? The consequences of our actions are always so complicated, so diverse, that predicting the future is a very difficult business indeed. Professor Trelawney, bless her, is living proof of that. You did a very noble thing in saving Pettigrew's life. But if he helps Voldemort back to power, Pettigrew owes his life to you. You have sent Voldemort a deputy who is in your debt. When one wizard saves another wizard's life, it creates a certain bond between them. And I'm much mistaken if Voldemort wants his servant in the debt of Harry Potter. I don't want to bond with Pettigrew. He betrayed my parents. This is magic at its deepest, its most impenetrable, Harry. But trust me, the time may come when you will be very glad you saved Pettigrew's life. Harry couldn't imagine when that would be. Dumbledore looked as though he knew what Harry was thinking. I knew your father very well, both at Hogwarts and later, Harry, he said gently. He would have saved Pettigrew too. I'm sure of it. Harry looked up at him. Dumbledore wouldn't laugh. He could tell Dumbledore. Last night, I thought it was my dad who'd conjured my Patronus. I mean, when I saw myself across the lake, I thought I was seeing him. An easy mistake to make, said Dumbledore softly. I expect you'll tire of hearing it, but you do look extraordinarily like James. Except for the eyes. You have your mother's eyes. Harry shook his head. It was stupid thinking it was him, he muttered. I mean, I knew he was dead. You think the dead we have loved ever truly leave us? You think that we don't recall them more clearly than ever in times of great trouble? Your father is alive in you, Harry, and shows himself most plainly when you have need of him. How else could you produce that particular Patronus? Prongs wrote again last night. It took a moment for Harry to realize what Dumbledore had said. "Last night, Sirius told me all about how they became Animagi," said Dumbledore, smiling. "An extraordinary achievement, not least keeping it quiet from me. And then I remembered the most unusual form your Patronus took, when it charged Mr. Malfoy down at your Quidditch match against Ravenclaw. So you did see your father last night, Harry. You found him inside yourself." And Dumbledore left the office, leaving Harry to his very confused thoughts. Nobody at Hogwarts knew the truth of what had happened the night that Sirius, Buckbeak, and Pettigrew had vanished, except Harry, Ron, Hermione, and Professor Dumbledore. As the end of the term approached, Harry heard many different theories about what had really happened, but none of them came close to the truth. Malfoy was furious about Buckbeak. He was convinced that Hagrid had found a way of smuggling the Hippogriff to safety, and seemed outraged that he and his father had been outwitted by a gamekeeper. Percy Weasley, meanwhile, had much to say on the subject of Sirius's escape. "If I manage to get into the Ministry, I'll have a lot of proposals to make about magical law enforcement," he told the only person who would listen, his girlfriend Penelope. Though the weather was perfect, though the atmosphere was so cheerful, though he knew they had achieved the near impossible in helping Sirius to freedom, Harry had never approached the end of a school year in worse spirits. He certainly wasn't the only one who was sorry to see Professor Lupin go. The whole of Harry's defense against the dark arts class was miserable about his resignation. "Wonder what they'll give us next year," said Seamus Finnegan gloomily. "Maybe a vampire," suggested Dean Thomas hopefully. It wasn't only Professor Lupin's departure that was weighing on Harry's mind. He couldn't help thinking a lot about Professor Trelawney's prediction. He kept wondering where Pettigrew was now, whether he had sought sanctuary with Voldemort yet. But the thing that was lowering Harry's spirits most of all was the prospect of returning to the Dursleys. For maybe half an hour, a glorious half hour, he had believed he would be living with Sirius from now on, his parents' best friend. It would have been the next best thing to having his own father back. And while no news of Sirius was definitely good news, because it meant he had successfully gone into hiding, Harry couldn't help feeling miserable when he thought of the home he might have had, and the fact that it was now impossible. The exam results came out on the last day of the term. Harry, Ron, and Hermione had passed every subject. Harry was amazed that he had got through potions. He had a shrewd suspicion that Dumbledore might have stepped in to stop Snape failing him on purpose. Snape's behavior toward Harry over the past week had been quite alarming. Harry wouldn't have thought it possible that Snape's dislike for him could increase, but it certainly had. A muscle twitched unpleasantly at the corner of Snape's thin mouth every time he looked at Harry, and he was constantly flexing his fingers, as though itching to place them around Harry's throat. Percy had got his top grade, NEWTs. Fred and George had scraped a handful of OWLs each. Gryffindor House, meanwhile, largely thanks to their spectacular performance in the Quidditch Cup, had won the house championship for the third year running. This meant that the end of the term feast took place and amid decorations of scarlet and gold, and that the Gryffindor table was the noisiest of the lot, as everybody celebrated. Even Harry managed to forget about the journey back to the Dursleys the next day as he ate, drank, talked, and laughed with the rest. As the Hogwarts Express pulled out of the station the next morning, Hermione gave Harry and Ron some surprising news. "I went to see Professor McGonagall this morning, just before breakfast. I've decided to drop Muggle studies." "But you passed your exam with 320%, said Ron. "I know," sighed Hermione, "but I can't stand another year like this one. That time turner, it was driving me mad. I've handed it in. Without Muggle studies and divination, I'll be able to have a normal schedule again." "I still can't believe you didn't tell us about it," said Ron grumpily. "We're supposed to be your friends." "I promised I wouldn't tell anyone," said Hermione severely. She looked around at Harry, who was watching Hogwarts disappear from view behind a mountain, 2 whole months before he'd see it again. "Oh, cheer up, Harry," said Hermione sadly. "I'm okay," said Harry quickly, "just thinking about the holidays." "Yeah, I've been thinking about them too," said Harry. "Harry, you've got to come and stay with us. I'll fix it up with Mum and Dad, and then I'll call you. I know how to use a Fellitone now." "A telephone," Ron said Hermione. "Honestly, you should take Muggle studies next year." Ron ignored her. "It's the Quidditch World Cup this summer. How about it, Harry? Come and stay, and we'll go and see it. Dad can usually get tickets from work." This proposal had the effect of cheering Harry up a great deal. "Yeah, I bet the Dursleys be pleased to let me come, especially after what I did to Aunt Marge." Feeling considerably more cheerful, Harry joined Ron and Hermione in several games of Exploding Snap, and when the witch with the tea cart arrived, he bought himself a very large lunch. though nothing with chocolate in it. But it was late in an afternoon before the thing that made him truly happy turned up. "Harry," said Hermione suddenly, peering over his shoulder. "What's that thing outside your window?" Harry turned to look outside. Something very small and gray was bobbing in and out of sight beyond the glass. He stood up for a better look and saw that it was a tiny owl, carrying a letter that was much too big for it. The owl was so small, in fact, that it kept tumbling over in the air, buffeted this way and that in the train's slipstream. Harry quickly pulled down the window, stretched out his arm, and caught it. It felt like a very fluffy snitch. He brought it carefully inside. The owl dropped its letter onto Harry's seat and began zooming around their compartment, apparently very pleased with itself for accomplishing its task. Hedwig clicked her beak with a sort of dignified disapproval. Crookshanks sat up in his seat, following the owl with his great yellow eyes. Ron, noticing this, snatched the owl safely out of harm's way. Harry picked up the letter. It was addressed to him. He ripped open the letter and shouted, "It's from Sirius!" "What?" said Ron and Hermione excitedly. "Read it aloud." "Dear Harry, I hope this finds you before you reach your aunt and uncle. I don't know whether they're used to owl post. Buckbeak and I are in hiding. I won't tell you where, in case this falls into the wrong hands. I have some doubt about the owl's reliability, but he is the best I could find, and he did seem eager for the job. I believe the Dementors are still searching for me, but they haven't a hope of finding me here. I am planning to allow some muggles to glimpse me soon, a long way from Hogwarts, so that the security on the castle will be lifted. There's something I never got around to telling you during our brief meeting. It was I who sent you the firebolt." "Ha!" said Hermione triumphantly. "See, I told you it was from him." "Yes, but he didn't jinx it, had he?" said Ron. "Ouch!" The tiny owl, now hooting happily in his hand, had nibbled one of his fingers in what it seemed to think was an affectionate way. "Crookshanks took the order to the owl office for me. I used your name, but told them to take the gold from Gringotts vault, number 711, my own. Please consider it as a 13 birthdays worth of presents from your godfather. I would also like to apologize for the fright I think I gave you that night last year when you left your uncle's house. I had only hoped to get a glimpse of you before starting my journey north, but I think the sight of me alarmed you. I'm enclosing something else for you, which I think will make your next year at Hogwarts more enjoyable. If you ever need me, send word. Your owl will find me. I'll write again soon. Sirius." Harry looked eagerly inside the envelope. There was another piece of parchment in there. He read it through quickly and felt suddenly as warm and contented as though he'd swallowed a bottle of hot butterbeer in one gulp. "I, Sirius Black, Harry Potter's godfather, hereby give him permission to visit Hogsmeade on weekends." "That'll be good enough for Dumbledore," said Harry happily. He looked back at Sirius's letter. "Hang on, there's a P.S. I thought your friend Ron might like to keep this owl, as it's my fault he no longer has a rat." Ron's eyes widened. The minute owl was still hooting excitedly. "Keep him?" he said uncertainly. He looked closely at the owl for a moment. Then, to Harry and Hermione's great surprise, he held him out for Crookshanks to sniff. "What do you reckon?" Ron asked the cat. "Definitely an owl?" Crookshanks purred. "That's good enough for me," said Ron. "He's mine." Harry read and reread the letter from Sirius all the way back into the King's Cross station. It was still clutched tightly in his hand as he, Ron, and Hermione stepped back through the barrier of platform 9 3/4. Harry spotted Uncle Vernon at once. He was standing a good distance from Mr. and Mrs. Weasley, eyeing them suspiciously, and when Mrs. Weasley hugged Harry in greeting, his worst suspicions about them seemed confirmed. "I'll call about the World Cup," Ron yelled after Harry as Harry bid him and Hermione goodbye, then wheeled the trolley bearing his trunk and Hedwig's cage toward Uncle Vernon, who greeted him in his usual fashion. "What's that?" he snarled, staring at the envelope Harry was still clutching in his hand. "If it's another form for me to sign, you've got another—" "It's not," said Harry cheerfully. "It's a letter from my godfather." "Godfather? You haven't got a godfather." "Yes, I have," said Harry brightly. "He was my mum and dad's best friend. He's a convicted murderer, but he's broken out of wizard prison and he's on the run. He likes to keep in touch with me, though. Keep up with my news, check if I'm happy." And, grinning broadly at the look of horror on Uncle Vernon's face, Harry set off toward the station exit, Hedwig rattling along in front of him for what looked like a much better summer than the last.
That was amazing. I, Sirius Black, a convicted felon who murdered 20 people, who is said to be seen murdering 20 people, and Pettigrew, give Harry the permission to drink butterbeer. Bye, Ryan. Love you, dude. Thank you for being here. This was so good, guys. This was so good. Oh my gosh. Oh, I'm so happy. That was a terrible reading. I'm so sorry, but I am so happy. Oh my goodness. And next week, we are starting Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. I think next year, next week, I'm going to do one reading with everybody in Patreon. So those who don't know what book club is can get, can know what it is, you know? Because I feel like I still like haven't really, I didn't announce when book club and stuff. Let's watch movie right now. No, I have to do work. Now I have to plan for this week. Got to get out a schedule for you guys and post that to Twitter. When movie Gib. Well, I'm now doing book clubs on Sundays. So, a free trial reading. Yeah, a little bit. Ew, I don't even think that many people will come, to be honest. Only like 30 people come when I do a secret or a ASMR stream here. Ow, my back hurts. Oh, I'm so happy. This book got so good. It got so good. It's 12:20. Yeah, I'm actually happy. I still have a few hours to put in some work before I gotta get some sleep. So, movie on Friday. I don't know. I'll make up the schedule. I'm gonna make up the schedule right now, so you guys will all see it on Twitter. Okay. Thank you guys for reading with me. Sorry, my accents were everywhere today. What in the heck? I'm finally hooked on Harry Potter. I'm so happy. I can't wait to see this movie. So excited. Okay. What if I don't have a Twitter? Make a Twitter, Azor. What the heck? How are you guys still saying you can be anonymous? Just make your name. Like, you don't have to put any of your info, make it all fake, but just be able to check on that, you know, and follow me and get notified every time I tweet. You noodles. That had the big numbers. Writers, please. Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm Hufflepuff. Did I tell you that Tyler retook the test and he got, I think he got Gryffindor. He got Gryffindor. And he always thought he was Slytherin. Yeah, no, I'm Hufflepuff. Unlock it. What the heck? Okay, that's weird. Okay, guys. They're troublemakers. Slytherins are. Yes. Yes. You're Ravenclaw. That makes sense. Ravenclaw. All right, guys. Well, I'm gonna get some work done. I'll be trying to get through more DMs this week. I should be getting back to being on top of them. Tyler gave me an amazing idea that I'm just like, my mind is blown. So pretty much what he does to DMs is he messages people back once a day. So like I find myself getting overwhelmed by DMs because I have a conversation for like 30 minutes with one person and then I try to get to the next person. But he's like, no, you just keep over, you know, however freaking long, you just keep these conversations going. You keep them saved in Snapchat, keep them saved in Discord. You read back a little bit if you forget, but like you just keep on and like just try to respond. No, you're okay, Cassie. That's not what I'm saying. That's not what I'm saying. There's just like, usually it's most people, you know, there's like a back and forth, and that's what always gave me anxiety. Cause I'm like, I don't know how to like, I'm so bad at saying bye to people or saying like, hey, I gotta go, or I'm gonna like, it just always feels awful. So if I just tell everybody like, hey, my goal is to respond to you once a day. So nice, Snuffles. Or are you actually going to snap me back? I'm going to work really hard at it. I would just like to say this doesn't take away from Tyler because he's really good at it. He's like, it is, there's two things. One, he doesn't get as many messages as me. And two, his messages are so easy to respond to. Oh my gosh. Like, like he shows me some of his messages where it's just like, dude, got a new dog. Or like, and then I like open up one of mine and it's like, Lauren, I really want to kill myself and this is happening and this is blah, 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 blah. What do I do? And I'm like, and he's like, oh my God. I'm like, yes, it's just, it's like, I don't know what I would do if I got those all the time. Like, obviously he gets a few of those, but it's just like, mine are mainly like, should we start messaging Tyler with terrible personal problems? Oh, Snubbles. I was like that with a few of my friends, just keep a convo going for days, even though we'd only text a few times a day. No, that like totally, I'm so dumb for not thinking of that. Did Tyler tell you that he wants to do a book club now? Yeah, he did tell me. He did tell me. He told me about Patreon stuff. I don't know if he exactly understands how Patreon works and how this will be taking out time from his streams because he's so like he wants like to him he feels good if he does like a long stream. Like you have to recognize that you still answer DMs and you do other things outside of stream that is working, you know, like we both work even if we stream 3 days a week, we're still working like over 50 hours a week. And he like but he only adds up the numbers of, thought it was cute because he seemed jealous of you. He did, like he saw that the other week. He was like, 1,000 people are on your Patreon. I'm like, excuse me, this is an art and I am terrible at doing it, but you go ahead and try. I cut myself in the kitchen and I'm out of super glue. What should I do? You were, yes, soon to be 6. I hope. And hopefully because of doing that, we can work, well, both of us, we can both work better and be happier, you know, I don't know. And I think we'll make up for the day like lost technically, because we'll just having that recharge just in the middle of the week too. So we have time to like call the doctor, make appointments, go do things, you know. Oh my gosh. I just forgot. I just realized. Oh, it's definitely not going to be like completely off the grid. We'll be planning and ideas and other things. But I'm getting my wisdom teeth taken out this Thursday. There goes this weekend. Oh no. Oh no. Oh no. I need to film tonight. Oh no. Oh no. Also, I need to find the medication that the surgeon gave me. Oh no. Oof. That is not going to be a fun few days. Yeah, at least I remembered before I published my schedule. Gosh, dang it. Oh, I'm so upset. Okay, I will look for that and I'll work on my schedule. Okay, guys. I will, Tony. No, Snuffles. I'll get the videos done. We will get the videos done. Don't you worry. I'm just saying, like, okay, just eat a bunch of pudding. Do I have to get them out? Like, ever? Can't I just have crappy teeth forever? Is that our 3-month? Oh, Cassie, I'm sorry. Okay, all right, John. I don't consider that off days because I would like, no, I finally, like, we had a good talk. We've scheduled things out. And now for like 4 days, I'm going to be in miserable pain. Just like bleeding and drooling everywhere. Yay. Awesome.
Hey, maybe I'll lose a few pounds. That'll be fun. You'll be in pain if you don't get them pulled. I know. People are saying it's terrible. You felt no pain after yours? When I got this one taken out, it was literally just like I went in, friggin' out in 10 minutes. In and out. Didn't hurt. Heading toward a fries only diet. I'm so hungry, I need to order food. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to work on my schedule, figure out some other little things for stream and stuff. Give you extra painkillers. Ooh, can I get some extra painkillers? All right, guys. I love you guys. Have a good night, and I will see you tomorrow, okay? Tomorrow's stream. We're still deciding. Tomorrow should start 1 or 2. We'll see. We'll see. You'll see on the schedule, okay? Bye. Good night. I love you guys. Oh, sorry, Juan. I love you. Good night. Good night. Good night. Good night. Bye. See ya. I don't know how to stop this thing.